the more I try to integrate my spiritual sort of awareness into the practicalities of like living, of having to have a mortgage and having to go to work, deal with normal people who don't care about any of this stuff, raise kids, be a husband, do the things, be a good boss. The more the practical side of it becomes more and more important to me. Because I think, sometimes we can kind of become lost. There's so much to read about all of this stuff. Even I want to write a book about this stuff. So, it's like everybody who has these experiences wants to write about it and wants to tell people and kind of shout it from the rooftops or whatever. And again, people have known the truth about these things for thousands of years. This is not new. But we are all going through the process of coming to terms with it on this generational scale of the fact that we're living in an unprecedented era of technological development. There's so many novel and unique things about the time we're living in, all the different political philosophies that grew out of the 20th century. The sort of birth of a mainstream secular movement that has decided that we don't need religious ideas and that man can come up with his own ideas about how society should be structured. So it's a crazy, unique time. I feel like people who are into, the rediscovery of ancient knowledge and ideas, it's sort of like the truth, I think, that was hidden from your average person for, I think sometimes conspiratorial reasons and sometimes for just practical reasons, just because, it's hard, I think, for us in the modern world to sort of put ourselves in that, to get our brains around that. It's tough. I think, that kind of also makes it tough to really, I think, truly get down with true understanding of like where we're at, because do we know the truth about history? I mean, I've seen a lot of speculative, people get into the Tartaria stuff. I mean, there's so much out there, I don't even know, man, where do you even start? So a lot of it is well, that's interesting, but I want to talk about the more practical elements of what I've learned, not necessarily get lost in what the ancient Egyptians thought about. Although, again, I find it very interesting, but I'm in a practical mode, I guess. And, I think a lot of that does have to do with having kids. You see how the process of narrative, how fundamental it truly is. I mean, it is kind of everything about how we experience the world. Do you believe God is just unity, like source or whatever? How do you define God, if at all? Anna, good question. How do I define God? It's more than just unity, and it's more than just source. I see God as having personhood in the way that we have personhood. We're individual, aware beings. I believe that God has a personality. These are hard things to tell you why I believe these things. It's only because of what I sort of gleaned from my interaction with this being. God, I believe, is the source of all truth and wisdom. I do suspect that maybe the universe is just purely a physical manifestation of that truth and wisdom. Physical truths, all the physical matter that we are made of and exists around us is a form of truth. The processes of biology, the processes that govern, how stars are born, or however stars work, all these things are divine truths. I believe there's a spiritual realm. There's a lot of things I believe that are kind of, mainstream Christianity, which I never would have imagined. Again, I only believe these things not because I was convinced by a Christian. I only believe these things because of what I experienced in this spiritual realm. Suffering, yeah, okay, it's a huge problem. And there's a couple ways I think about this. One way is that there's an assumption in a lot of Christian, maybe other religious circles, that God can do anything, that God is unbound by anything. I'm not 100% sure on that because that's not something I experienced in my spiritual experience, so God might not have a choice in how he has to deal with a certain situation. And I see the entire cosmos, the universe, life itself, humanity in particular, as having a really distinct purpose. There's a dark side to every human being. Because I believe that we are in a war. And I think it's obvious if you look within. Like, God doesn't create evil, God creates what is good. And I think that's evident if you look around at nature. And you might say, well, how is a wasp that burrows into the eyeballs of children? People use this example. I've seen this in like atheistic debates. So what's the purpose of that suffering? Like, why would God create a universe where these children in these communities are suffering from this horrible botfly life cycle? And yeah, that's tough, man. But I really believe that we have an eternal existence, that there's a yin and yang to the physical realm and the spiritual realm, where they each contain the other within them. The physical realm is constricted and limited and ordered. The spiritual realm is not constricted, not ordered. There's a contrast there. The things that we experience here are limited. The things that we experience in the spiritual realm are unlimited. And so I'd like, somebody who's asking that question to think about, let's say you suffer every day of your life, which people do. I mean, people are born with horrible, birth defects, horrible accidents. There's awful things that happen. And I guess I would just ask, in the context of an eternal existence, how do you measure 70 years of suffering against eternity? And the obvious answer is that you can't. If you really believe that, that we have a limited existence here, and then when we die, we have an eternal existence in the spirit realm. Yeah, it's hard to believe sometimes, yes. But if, let's say you accept it, the question of suffering just kind of becomes like, yeah, it's terrible. And there is a beauty and a horror to the universe. It's so clear that, the cosmos can only exist this way. We're experiencing the narrowest of narrow bands of visible light, and the narrowest of narrow bands of what it means to have an atmosphere on the surface of a planet. We can only hear a very narrow range of sound. We can only see a very narrow range of light. And we can only exist in a very narrow temperature range. There's all these, you can drown in a 6-inch bathtub. I mean, if just one of these things is out of place, the entire system falls apart. I'm not trying to make a comment on anything other than the fact that it may be possible that God can't create the kind of universe that you're comparing it to. People say, well, wouldn't God, a being of infinite love and all this stuff, wouldn't a God like that not allow that kind of suffering? And it's like, I don't know, man. I don't take that question maybe as seriously as I should. I don't know. Everything about how we experience existence is based on this narrow Goldilocks zone of where things can happen. And there's a lot of chaos on the fringes of that. This is a highly, highly ordered garden. The garden in Genesis is the perfect analogy to what is happening on our planet.